I'm Clara Whitmore. I'm 29 now. But my life changed at 18 during what was supposed to be a simple graduation trip to Colorado. My family thought it would be hilarious to abandon me at a gas station in Wyoming. No explanation, no warning, just a text that said, "Let's see if she can survive without us." They laughed as they drove away. But I never went back. Not in a week, not in a year, not for 17 years. And by the time they found me again, I wasn't the girl they thought they'd left behind. Before I share how being discarded became the reason I built everything I have now, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Subscribe if you've ever chosen to stay silent, not because you had nothing to say, but because you knew one day your life would speak for itself. Growing up in the Whitmore household meant learning to brace yourself before every dinner, every birthday, every family photo. My parents, Linda and Thomas, believed in tough love, except their version wasn't strength building, it was humiliation, carefully disguised as humor. And for as long as I can remember, the punchline was always me. They called it character, I called it survival. My mother had a polished cruelty. She never raised her voice, never scolded in public. Instead, she'd smile gently as she adjusted my dress and say, "You'd be so pretty if you lost just a little weight." Or, "Maybe if you didn't frown so much, your skin would clear up." She delivered these comments like compliments, each one wrapped in sweetness and laced with shame. My father was more direct. He'd laugh the loudest when one of my brothers set me up to fail. Thomas Whitmore, regional director of a major insurance firm, saw emotional resilience as something that needed to be drilled in, not nurtured. Evan and Derek, my older brothers, were the perfect protégés. Evan, the eldest, followed in Dad's footsteps at the firm. Derek handled the marketing side, charming and clever, but never at my expense, unless he thought it was funny, and he often did. Our family traditions weren't built around holidays or togetherness. They were built around target practice, and I was the moving target. We had a photo album filled with smiling faces and cruel memories. My 10th birthday, when they convinced me no one was coming to the party, until I'd cried myself into silence. Then came the surprise, my middle school graduation, when they forgot the date and showed up halfway through, laughing. Prom night, when my date never arrived because they gave him the wrong address. All followed by the same line, "Can't you take a joke?" Clara. I used to wonder what was wrong with me, why I couldn't laugh with them, why everything felt like a test I kept failing. But over time, I stopped reacting altogether. I didn't shout or cry. I simply withdrew. At meals, I barely spoke. At family events, I hovered at the edges. When they laughed, I smiled tightly, never sure if I was next. They said I was too sensitive, that I needed to lighten up. But they didn't realize the silence I carried wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of distance. From the outside, we looked like the all-American family. A successful father, a poised mother, two accomplished sons, and a daughter who didn't quite fit. At church, neighbors would comment on how quiet I was. At school, teachers noted I was well-behaved, but no one ever asked why I never brought friends home, or why I never spoke during family interviews or holiday videos. Because in the Whitmore house, you learned early that love was earned through compliance. Those jokes came with consequences. That visibility was a liability. By the time I was 18, I'd mastered the art of disappearing without ever leaving the room. And that, to them, was success. When I walked across the stage at the University of Illinois at Chicago, diploma in hand, I wasn't expecting tears or applause from my family. I wasn't even expecting pride. But I had hoped, in some quiet part of myself, for something close to acknowledgement. Instead, as we left the ceremony, my father adjusted his tie, looked at me with a businesslike nod, and said, "Well, now that you've got that out of the way, let's talk about the website." That wasn't a joke. I had just earned my degree in graphic design, 4 years of late-night projects, software crashes, internships, and caffeine-fueled critiques. It was the one thing I had done entirely on my own, and before the cap even left my head, they were already pulling me back into the only world they believed mattered theirs. At dinner that night, seated at a long table in a steakhouse none of us could really afford, my mother raised a glass. "To Clara," she said, pausing for effect, who will soon be making Whitmore Insurance look very polished and professional. My brothers chuckled. I looked around. No one had asked me what I wanted to do next. I had tried, softly, carefully, to express my plans. I'd been applying to creative agencies around the city, hoping to build a portfolio that was mine. I wanted to work on branding campaigns, interactive design, something alive. But to my parents, branding was a buzzword. Freelancing meant unemployment. And creative agency sounded like a temp job in denial. You can do your little art projects for the firm, my mother said, cutting into her fillet. It's stable. You'll thank us someday. The words were delivered with such certainty. I almost doubted myself. My brothers leaned in, Evan offering a wink, Derek smirking. We could use some fresh design for the annual report, Evan said. You know, spice it up a bit, but keep it classy, corporate. They weren't offering me a job. They were offering me a seat at the kiddie table. What they didn't say out loud, but made painfully clear, was that they expected me to stay close, stay quiet, and stay available. My future, to them, wasn't a canvas. It was a tool, a decorative piece for the family machine. I tried to push back gently. I've been interviewing, I said, my voice too soft even to my own ears. A few places in River North are looking for junior designers. I'd love to explore. River North, my dad interrupted, laughing like I'd said I wanted to join the circus. Honey, you'd be eaten alive. You're not ready for that kind of hustle, my mom added. Why struggle for clients and rent when you have a roof over your head and guaranteed work right here? Honestly, Clara, let's be practical. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a reminder. Even though I lived in a small apartment in the city, the rent was still paid by them. Even though I bought groceries with my part-time income from the coffee shop, my phone bill, car insurance, and emergencies were still handled through their accounts. And they made sure I remembered that. I mean, it's fine if you want to play around with agencies, Derek added. Just don't expect to keep living on mom and dad's dime while chasing some passion project. I smiled. I always smiled. It was easier than saying what I really wanted to say. That maybe, just maybe, I deserved to be more than a footnote in someone else's business plan, that my ideas, my talent, and my ambition had value outside of the Whitmore name. But saying that would have been crossing a line. And in our family, the rules were clear: don't make them uncomfortable. So instead, I nodded. I thanked them for dinner. I said I was grateful. I even agreed to take a look at the company's outdated brochure, just to be helpful. Later that night, sitting alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop and stared at a blank screen. I had portfolios to finish, emails to send, resumes to polish. But all I could hear was my father's voice. You're not ready for that kind of hustle. And maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't ready. But what he didn't know, what none of them saw, was that I wasn't staying because I lacked confidence. I was staying because I had no other choice. And they knew it. 3 weeks after graduation, my family surprised me with what they called a celebration trip. A week in Colorado, fresh air, mountains, bonding time. It was their version of a gift, a gesture wrapped in itinerary emails and overly enthusiastic group texts. But I'd lived long enough in the Whitmore household to know that gifts often came with strings and jokes. We piled into my dad's SUV early on a Sunday morning. Evan took the front seat, naturally. Derek claimed the left side of the back. I was last to load in, wedged behind the driver, window half blocked by luggage, legs curled to fit. My mother adjusted her sunglasses in the mirror and handed me a lukewarm coffee. Enjoy the ride, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The first few hours were fine, in that strained, artificial way long family trips always are. But by hour 3, it started. Did you remember to pack a brain this time? Clara Derek called over his shoulder, grinning. Evan chimed in. Better check her bag. Make sure she didn't forget her shoes like Florida. Florida. I was 16. I'd left my sandals at home and they refused to stop so I could buy a new pair. I spent 3 days sitting on the beach fully dressed while they laughed about it over dinner. Now they were laughing again. My dad chuckled, shaking his head like it was just harmless nostalgia. My mom reapplied her lipstick, looking out the window like none of it involved her. I didn't respond. I never did. I just stared out at the highway, watching as the trees blurred into open land. Around lunch, things escalated. Evan hid my phone. I tore through my backpack in a quiet panic, only for him to pull it from his hoodie pocket with a smirk. Relax, he said. Just wanted to see if you'd notice. Derek ate the sandwich I'd packed for myself. My dad took a detour that added an hour to the trip, then blamed my poor navigation skills. These were the rules. They set the traps. I absorbed the fallout. That night, we stopped at a hotel in Nebraska. 2 rooms, parents in one, kids in the other. I waited until the hallway was quiet before I let myself breathe. But the walls in cheap hotels are thin. I heard them talking through the adjoining door, their voices low but clear. My mother's tone was clipped. She's too sensitive. Tom, always has been. The real world's going to eat her alive if she doesn't toughen up. My father sighed. Maybe this trip will finally teach her something. She needs to stop being such a pushover. Their words settled in my chest like a stone, heavy, unmoving. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the AC pulsing like a countdown in my ears. Outside, a truck passed on the highway. The room smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and stale cologne. I closed my eyes, trying to pretend I was anywhere else. Just 5 more days. Then I'd be back in Chicago, back to job applications and my cramped apartment and maybe, some kind of future that didn't involve constantly bracing for impact. What I didn't know, as I lay in that bed holding back tears, was that the next day would change everything, that this would be the last trip I'd ever take with them, that I would never sit in that SUV again. Not as a daughter, not as anything. They thought they were teaching me a lesson, and in a way, they did. The second morning of the trip began with an eerie quiet, the kind of silence that feels rehearsed. My family, for once, wasn't bickering, no sarcastic remarks, no stifled laughter behind my back, just forced politeness and the rustling of snack bags. I should have known something was coming. With them, calm always meant something was being planned. Around noon, we crossed into Wyoming. The plains stretched endlessly, broken only by the distant outline of hills. Dad announced we needed gas. Next town. Millhaven, he said, squinting at a weathered road sign. Millhaven wasn't much. A blink-and-you-miss-it town with a single main street, a diner, a post office, and a lone gas station tucked just outside the city limits. The station sat like a forgotten relic. One old pump, a tiny convenience store, and nothing but open land on 3 sides. I'm going to use the restroom and grab some snacks, I said as we pulled in. Anyone want anything Coke? Evan muttered, eyes glued to his phone. Beef jerky, Derek added. Mom didn't answer. She was too busy adjusting her eyeliner in the visor mirror. Inside, the store was dim and quiet. A woman behind the counter looked up and smiled politely. Her name tag read Shelley. She looked like someone who had spent her entire life in that town. Steady, calm, kind in a way I didn't recognize. I used the restroom, picked up the drinks and snacks, added a bottle of water and some trail mix for myself. When I stepped outside, the heat hit like a wall. And then, I stopped. The parking space where our SUV had been was empty. I blinked, certain I'd made a mistake. I turned around, scanned the lot. Maybe Dad had moved the car to check the tires or grab something from the back. But there were no other vehicles in sight, just the wind, dry and indifferent. They were gone. I walked around the side of the building, then the back. Nothing. I jogged to the edge of the lot, thinking maybe, they were playing some kind of twisted joke and had pulled around the corner. But there was nothing there, just open road. A sick feeling spread in my stomach. I pulled out my phone. 18% battery. I called Dad, straight to voicemail. Mom, voicemail. Evan. It rang twice, then a click. Hey, Clara, Evan said, laughter already creeping into his voice. We're about 20 minutes down the road now. What? My voice trembled. Turn around. Come back. This isn't funny. In the background, I heard Derek yell. Let's see if she can make it back on her own laughter. Then the call dropped. A message buzzed in. A photo from Evan, all of them in the SUV, smiling wide. Caption survival of the fittest. Sis, find your way home. I tried calling again. Every number, one by one. Voicemail. Blocked. I stood alone in that cracked parking lot, the Wyoming sun sharp against my skin. No shade, no car, just my purse, a plastic bag of snacks, and a phone that was dying. I checked my wallet. $43 in cash. One debit card with barely enough for a cheap bus ticket. If a bus even stopped here, no suitcase, no clothes, no charger. I sat down on the curb, the asphalt radiating heat through my jeans. My hands trembled as I scrolled through my messages, desperate for any sign they were joking, that they'd come back. Then, another photo arrived, them at a restaurant, drinks raised. Caption: wonder if Clara found dinner yet, followed by a string of laughing emojis. I wanted to scream. I wanted to believe it wasn't real. But they were gone. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't lost track of time. They had left me. Deliberately, cruelly, calculated. In a state where I knew no one. In a town I'd never heard of. With no plan. No way home. And no illusion left about the people who had always claimed to love me. I must have sat on that curb for 3 hours. The sun began to shift, and the air cooled just enough to make the silence feel heavier. Every passing minute chipped away at whatever denial I had left. They weren't coming back. Not in an hour, not tonight, not ever. At some point. Shelley, the woman from the counter, stepped out. She'd finished her shift, keys in hand, purse slung over one shoulder. She paused when she saw me, still sitting there, my bag of snacks untouched at my feet. "Honey," she said softly. "Are you okay?" That question, so simple, so undeservedly kind, broke something loose in me, through shaking words and quiet tears. I told her the truth, about the joke, about being left behind, about how my calls went unanswered, about the photo of them at dinner while I sat outside a gas station with a dying phone and $43 to my name. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she didn't ask why I didn't scream at them, or call the police, or fight harder to be seen. Instead, she said, "That's not a prank, that's abandonment." Then she pulled her phone from her pocket and made a call. "I know someone," she told me. "Her name's Dorothy Lane. She's lived here most of her life. Keeps a room for travelers or people between places. Let me see if she's home, within 30 minutes. I was sitting in the passenger seat of Shelley's pickup, heading into Millhaven proper. The town was quiet. 4 blocks of low brick buildings, a library, a diner, a hardware store, and, tucked between a florist and an antique shop, a small bookstore with a sign that read, "The Lantern Shelf." "That's Dorothy's shop," Shelley said. "She lives just a few streets over." Dorothy Lane greeted me at her front porch with a calmness I didn't know how to accept. Silver hair pulled back in a twist, soft cardigan sleeves rolled to her elbows, and eyes that studied me. Not like I was broken, but like I was human. "You can stay in the spare room tonight," she said simply, unlocking the door. "We'll figure out tomorrow in the morning." No interrogation, no pity, just presence. Her house smelled like old books and fresh laundry. The room she showed me was small but clean, twin bed, worn dresser, a tiny desk with a lamp already turned on. She handed me a folded nightgown and a small toiletry kit. "I keep a few of these for emergencies," she said. "This one's yours now." That night, I cried quietly into a borrowed pillow, not just because I'd been left behind, but because someone I had never met had decided I was worth making space for. The next morning, over a breakfast of buttered toast and black coffee, I told her more. About college, about design, about how every step toward independence had been quietly undermined. About how, until Shelley and Dorothy, I had never really met kindness without conditions. Dorothy listened the way some people read, carefully, without rushing to the end. After a pause, she said, "I could use help at the shop, doesn't pay much, but it covers the room. Few hours each evening. That is, if you're staying a while." I said yes before I even realized it, because for the first time in days, maybe in years, I felt like I had a choice. That afternoon, I walked into Millhaven Diner, a squat little building on the edge of Main Street with red booths and scuffed tile floors. I asked the manager if they needed extra hands. She looked me over. "You ever waitress before?" "No," I admitted. "But I can learn. Start tomorrow. Breakfast and lunch shift. aprons in the back. Just like that. I had 2 jobs, a place to sleep, a list of things to do. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The first week passed in a blur of exhaustion. I was up before dawn, working the breakfast and lunch shift at Millhaven Diner, pouring coffee, balancing plates, pretending I knew how to carry 4 orders at once without dropping someone's hash browns. Then, after a short break, I'd head to the lantern shelf to help Dorothy close shop, sorting books, restocking shelves, learning the rhythm of a quieter kind of labor. I didn't talk much, not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure who I was anymore without the version my family had created. The girl who was always the joke, the one no one took seriously. What did it mean to show up in a place where no one had a script already written for me? Tessa was the first person who truly saw through the quiet. She worked the midday shift at the diner, 25, sharp, kind without softness. A single mom with tired eyes and a don't mess with me ponytail. On my 4th day, she found me crying in the break room, my back against the mop closet door, wiping my eyes with a folded paper napkin. Family trouble, she asked, sitting beside me, unscrewing the top of her water bottle like we had all the time in the world. I didn't know why I answered, but I did. The story poured out, halting, uncertain, messy, the jokes that weren't funny, the phone calls that never came, the text with the restaurant photo while I sat alone behind a gas station. She listened without flinching, and when I finished, she said the one sentence no one had ever said out loud, "Clara, that's not joking, that's abuse." I looked at her, startled. She didn't blink. "You were the family scapegoat. They made you believe you were overreacting, that you were fragile, when really, you were surviving. That's not something to go back to, that's something to leave behind." It landed like truth always does, heavy, undeniable, and freeing all at once. That night, I didn't check my phone for messages. I didn't rehearse responses in my head. Instead, I sat on the small porch of Dorothy's house and opened my laptop for the first time since arriving in Millhaven. I emailed 2 of my former design professors. I told them, briefly, that I was in a difficult family situation, temporarily out of Chicago, but still eager to work. I asked if they had any remote opportunities, or knew anyone looking for freelance help. I created a new email account, one my family didn't know. Then I closed my inbox and slept deeper than I had in weeks. 2 days later, Dorothy came into the shop holding a worn flyer for an upcoming poetry reading. "I've used the same design for years," she said, shaking her head. "You're a designer, right? Think you could make something better?" It was the first time someone asked me to create without expecting to control the outcome. I said yes. I opened my design software, built a layout from scratch, picked fonts that felt warm and inviting. When I showed her the draft, she blinked like she didn't know what to say. "This looks professional," she said, "like something you'd see in a real bookstore." "It is a real bookstore," I replied. That week, I printed the flyers, hung them in windows, and shared a digital version with a few local Facebook groups. Within days, customers were coming in asking about the event. That's when I met Jonas King. He came by to drop off his latest book order. 2 titles on web development, one on UX theory, beard, quiet confidence, a calm that felt earned. Dorothy introduced us. "Jonas builds websites," she said. "Clara's been helping me with design." Jonas nodded. "You're the one behind those flyers," I nodded. "They're good. Clean layout, eye-catching. You ever done interface design?" I hadn't. Not yet. But I wanted to learn. We talked for 20 minutes, about design principles, about rural businesses trying to go digital, about how so many small towns were full of people doing meaningful work, but stuck with websites that looked like they were built in 2003. "You've got an eye," Jonas said. "If you ever want to pick up some freelance work, or learn some code, I've got projects." That night, I walked home in the cool spring air, thinking about everything that had changed in just 2 weeks. I wasn't waiting to be rescued anymore. I was rebuilding. Jonas kept his word. 3 days after our first conversation, he showed up at the lantern shelf with a laptop and a folded piece of notebook paper. "2 of my clients are building out their websites," he said, tapping the paper. "They don't need code, just design. and they need it fast. You interested? I stared at the numbers he'd written down, rates, deadlines, contact info, and felt something strange rise in my chest. Not panic, not fear, hope. I said yes. The first project was small, a bakery in the next town over, just a logo redesign, a homepage mock-up, and social media templates. But when I sent over the files, the owner replied with a voice memo that nearly brought me to tears. "This is beautiful," she said. "It finally feels like us." The second was a hardware store. Jonas handled the back end. I designed the entire front-facing experience, clean, warm, with just enough personality to make it feel local. They sent a gift card with the final payment, thanking me for bringing us out of the 90s. Meanwhile, Dorothy's store had become something of a local gem. The new flyers brought in foot traffic, the upgraded website, built by Jonas, styled by me. Let customers place orders online, see upcoming events, and even sign up for a newsletter. Within a month, sales were up 15%. Dorothy beamed when she told me. "It's not just the business," she said. "It's the energy. The place feels alive again." I smiled. But what I didn't say was that I felt it too. By month 3, I had 3 part-time clients, steady hours at the diner, and a new evening schedule at the bookstore. I'd begun to save, not just out of necessity, but out of instinct. A little here, a little there. Folded bills in a jar, then a savings account in my name, mine. One afternoon, as I was dropping off a flyer at the hardware store, the owner, an older man named Carl, mentioned the studio apartment above his shop. "Used to rent it out," he said. "Nice view, decent light. But it's been empty a while. You looking, I didn't even hesitate." He handed me the key that day. No deposit, no questions, just a handshake. The apartment was small, maybe 400 square feet, sloped ceilings, creaky floorboards, a single window that looked out over Main Street. But to me, it felt massive. It wasn't borrowed. It wasn't conditional. It didn't come with expectations or the threat of being revoked. It was mine. I moved in on a Thursday, carrying boxes one by one up the narrow staircase. Dorothy helped me unpack. Tessa brought over a set of dishes she no longer used. Jonas brought me a second-hand lamp and said, "It's not much, but I figured your desk needed something warm." That night, I sat cross-legged on the floor with a mug of tea and a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. I looked around, bare walls, scattered books, a chipped coffee table, and felt something I hadn't felt since before the gas station. Peace, before bed. I walked to the small kitchen, placed a potted succulent on the windowsill, and whispered to no one in particular. "This is the first day of my new life. No more borrowed space. No more earning a seat at the table. No more asking for permission to exist." 3 months after the gas station, my life no longer resembled anything my family would have recognized. I had clients, real ones. I had my own apartment. I had quiet friendships built not on obligation, but on presence. Most nights, I went to sleep knowing what the next day would bring. That was new and precious. So when my phone lit up with a Chicago number I didn't recognize, I hesitated. I almost didn't answer. But something made me press accept. "Clara." The voice was unmistakable. "Evan." My hand tightened around the phone. "What do you want?" He exhaled like this was some chore he'd been putting off. "Look, the joke's over. Okay, we've been trying to reach you. You've made your point." I stood up from my desk, pacing toward the window. "My point. You've been gone 3 months. We figured you'd be back in a week. When you didn't call, we thought you were just being stubborn." I let the silence stretch. I wanted him to feel it. Then I said, calmly, "That wasn't a joke." "Evan," he scoffed. "Come on. We didn't leave you in the middle of nowhere. You left me in a town I didn't know, in a state I'd never been to, with no car, no suitcase, and no way home. You blocked my number. You sent photos while I sat on the curb trying to figure out where I'd sleep that night." He didn't reply. "That's not a prank," I continued. "That's abandonment." A pause. Then the tone shifted. Dismissive, familiar. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, my voice low and steady. "I'm being honest. You're just not used to hearing it from me." He sighed again, then tried a different angle. "Mom and Dad want to talk to you. They've been worried. They think maybe it went too far." "It did," I said. But I'm not calling for apologies. I'm not calling at all. You've made your point, he repeated. No. Evan. I've made my life. The line went quiet. I have a job. I continued. I have an apartment. I have people who respect me. You didn't think I could survive without you, did you? He laughed, but it sounded thin. Clara, be serious. What are you even doing out there? Millhaven isn't exactly a career move. And there it was, the condescension, the disbelief that my success, however small, could be real if it didn't trace back to them. I'm doing just fine, I said. Better, actually, because for once, I don't owe anyone anything. Another pause. Then his voice dropped into something softer. They miss you. I don't miss being humiliated. You're not going to give them a chance. I breathed in. Then out. They had 22 years worth of chances. And then I did the thing I'd never done before. I hung up first. Then I blocked the number. I stood by the window for a long time after that call, watching the light change across the buildings of Main Street. My town. My life. They had expected me to crawl back, but I had built something they couldn't take credit for. And that was the real ending to their so-called joke. After that call with Evan, something shifted. Not in fear, not in sadness, but in direction. I stopped waiting for closure that would never come, and I started building the kind of life that didn't require anyone's permission. Jonas and I had been working together on client projects for months. He handled the back end, I handled design. One evening over coffee, he looked up from his laptop and said, "We should make this official." So we did. We filed the paperwork, signed a lease on a small second-floor space above the town's old post office, and called it Northlight Creative. The name came from the way the morning sun lit up our new office, soft and steady through the north-facing windows. It felt like a beginning. Word spread quickly in Millhaven and the surrounding towns. Businesses that had been stuck with clunky, outdated websites started reaching out. We offered simple, beautiful, accessible design, tailored for people who didn't speak tech. Our calendar filled up. Our name started to mean something. 3 months in, I got an email from a magazine editor at Summit Enterprise, a regional publication that featured small-town entrepreneurs. She'd heard about our agency from one of our clients and asked if I'd be open to an interview. I said yes. The article came out in early spring. A 4-page spread with photos of our office, our projects, and one full-length shot of me, standing beside a wall of mood boards, smiling, arms crossed. The headline read, "How One Designer Built a Business Out of a Breakdown and Brought New Life to Main Street." It was honest, but careful. I didn't talk about the gas station, I didn't name my family. But I did mention starting over, reclaiming agency, choosing a new path, and that was enough. 2 weeks later, the emails started. First from my father, then from Evan, then from Derek. Subject lines like "We saw the article." Or "Can we talk?" in one. Simply "Please respond." I didn't. Then came the phone call to our agency's main line. My office manager, a college student named Gwen, followed the instructions I'd given her long ago. "I'm sorry," she told the caller. "Miss Whitmore doesn't take personal messages through the business." I thought that would be the end of it. But one Thursday afternoon, as I returned from a lunch meeting, Gwen met me at the front door, wide-eyed. "There's someone here to see you," she said quietly. She said her name is Linda. I stopped cold. There, sitting in the reception area, hands folded in her lap, posture perfect as ever, was my mother. She looked older. Her hair had more silver in it, and the lines around her eyes were deeper. But her expression hadn't changed. Composed, controlled, unreadable. "Clara," she said, standing. "You look, well." "I am well," I replied. My voice surprised me, steady, unapologetic. "Can we talk?" she asked. Privately, I glanced down the hallway toward my office. I could have said no, could have told her to leave and never come back. But after all this time, I wasn't afraid of her anymore. "This way," I said, holding the door open. We sat across from each other in a space built with intention, framed artwork, client photos, a quiet hum of music from the speaker in the corner. She looked around, then back at me. "This is impressive," she said softly. "The magazine didn't do it justice." I didn't respond. She folded her hands again. Your father hired someone after Evan saw you in Denver. But you'd changed your number. We couldn't find you. I wasn't hiding, I said. I was living. She blinked. That sentence hit harder than anything else I could have said. She nodded slowly. We made a mistake, she whispered. A terrible one. What started as a joke turned into something we didn't know how to undo. I looked at her, and for once, I didn't see power. I didn't see judgment. I saw someone who had lost control of the story. But I had found mine. My mother sat across from me in the office I had built with my own hands, in a town she'd never cared to know, surrounded by the quiet proof that I had never needed to be rescued. She looked around slowly, taking in the design boards on the wall, the framed testimonials from clients, the sunlight pouring across the polished concrete floor. For the first time in my life, I could see her calculating how much of it had been done without her. She cleared her throat. Your father, he's not the same since we saw the article. Neither am I. I said nothing. Linda continued, choosing her words carefully. We didn't think you'd stay away. We thought you'd come back, eventually, after a week or a month. But you didn't. And when we realized you weren't going to call, her voice faltered. It hit us harder than we expected. I watched her closely, searching for the subtle manipulations I'd grown up decoding. But what I found instead was something quieter. Not performance, not guilt. Just the worn-out face of someone trying to say too little. Too late. You built something real here, she said finally. Something powerful. I didn't see that in you before. And I should have. That, at least, felt honest. I leaned back in my chair. My voice was calm. You didn't just fail to see it. You worked hard not to. She looked down. I know. There was a pause. Then she asked, is there any part of you that wants to rebuild? To at least talk to your brothers, your father? I thought about that question for a long moment. And then I said, gently but without hesitation, no. Linda flinched. Just slightly. But I didn't fill the silence. I didn't soften the truth. I'm not angry, I said. I don't need an apology. I'm not looking for reconciliation. She looked up, eyes searching mine. Then what are you looking for? I smiled, not with bitterness, but with finality. I'm not looking anymore. I already found what I needed. A life, my own. The quiet in the room grew fuller. Not tense, just final. Linda nodded, slowly, like she understood that I wasn't speaking in metaphors. You were always the quiet one, she murmured. We thought that meant you were weak. I shook my head. It meant I was listening. She stood, smoothing the hem of her coat. There was nothing left to say. And for once, I didn't reach for a better ending. Later that night, after the office had emptied and the street below had gone quiet, I opened my laptop and selected a photo taken the week before. It was me, standing with my team in front of the Northlight Creative sign. Jonas to my left, Gwen and our junior designer laughing in the background, light catching in the window behind us. I sent it to her in an email with no subject line, no message, no explanation, just that image, a silent answer to every question she might ask, and that, for the first time in my life, was enough. 17 years had passed since the day they left me behind in Millhaven. 17 years since I sat alone outside that gas station, waiting for a car that would never return. I didn't count the time by grief. I counted it by growth, measured in new homes, new clients, new choices. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. It came in a cream-colored envelope. The return address printed in the corner a law firm in Chicago I didn't recognize. Inside was a formal notice from the estate of Thomas and Linda Whitmore. The company, Whitmore Insurance Group, had been sold. The proceeds, it said, were to be divided equally among the 3 children. I read the sentence twice. There was also a second envelope, this one handwritten, signed simply, Mom, in it. Linda spoke of retirement, of downsizing, of moving to Arizona for the climate. She mentioned Evan's children, Derek's wife. Then, without embellishment, she added, we are hosting a small gathering at the house next month. We would like you to come. No pressure. No expectations. Just a chance to close old chapters before new ones begin. There was no manipulation in the wording, no veiled guilt, just a carefully extended hand. For days, I didn't answer. My life in Millhaven was full. Northlight Creative had grown into something far beyond what I ever imagined. Caleb and I had been married for 8 years. Our twin daughters were 6, curious, kind, and full of stories about the garden we were learning to grow together. We had built something real, something rooted in peace, not performance. And yet, I kept the letter on the table, reading it once each morning as if testing for weight. When Caleb asked whether I wanted to go, I didn't answer right away. Instead, I thought about what I would tell my daughters if they asked. Why they had never met my family. Why the people who should have protected me had vanished from every photo, every story, every holiday. And then, one evening, I looked up from my tea and said, I think I need to see it. Not for them, for me. Caleb nodded. Just say the word. I'll be here when you get back. I booked a ticket for one night. I didn't bring my daughters. I didn't bring photos. I didn't promise anything beyond showing up. The house looked exactly as I remembered. Trimmed hedges, a wide white porch, windows that hadn't changed in 30 years. But as I stood at the front door, suitcase in hand, I didn't feel 13 again. I didn't feel 17, or 22, or the age I was when I stopped waiting for their approval. I felt whole. Linda opened the door. Her hair was now completely white, her face thinner, softer. She gave a tentative smile. You came. I did, I said, without warmth or anger. Inside, the house had been staged for comfort, soft lighting, simple dishes, a backyard table set for 6. Evan's kids ran barefoot in the grass. Derek offered me a drink. No one mentioned the past, but it hovered, quiet and undeniable, in every pause. And then, as the sun dipped behind the trees, my father motioned for me to join him in the study. I hesitated for only a moment. That room had once been a place of lectures, cold silences, and decisions made without my voice. Now it was just wood and walls. We sat across from each other in the chairs I used to fear. I'm not good at this, he began, but I owe you an apology. Clara, what we did, what I let happen, it was wrong. I studied him, the way age had softened his hands, the way regret no longer sat behind armor. Why, I asked quietly, why did you do it? He looked down. My father was cruel. I thought that was the mold. I thought I was making you stronger. I nodded slowly. You didn't make me stronger. You made me quieter. He swallowed. I see that now. We didn't hug. There were no tears. Just a recognition that something had shifted. When I left the next morning, I didn't feel healed. I didn't feel forgiving. I felt certain that I had returned not to repair anything, but to prove I didn't need to. The morning after the gathering, I stood in the quiet of my childhood room, now stripped of the posters and old furniture, the corners echoing with absence. The house still smelled the same lemon polish, faint lavender from the linen closet, but none of it felt like home. Before I left, my father found me in the hallway. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't offer a rehearsed line. He simply looked at me and said, I see now that what we did wasn't strength. It was fear. And it cost us more than we understood. I nodded. There was nothing left to add. No hug, no dramatic tears. Just a truth finally spoken out loud. That was enough. On the plane back to Millhaven, I watched the clouds pass beneath me, my fingers resting on the armrest. Not clenched, not cold, just still. When I stepped back into our home, Caleb waiting with coffee, our daughters racing down the hall to greet me, I realized something I hadn't known until that moment. I wasn't returning from anything. I had never been lost. I had simply stepped away, not to punish, not to disappear, but to build something that didn't require apology, or proof, or permission. Back at the office, Gwen had left a sticky note on my desk. Client loved the mock-ups. Call them Monday. I smiled, setting my bag down beside a row of printed flyers for next month's community event. That evening, I stood on the porch of the home I had chosen, watching my daughters chase fireflies in the yard. I wasn't the abandoned girl anymore. I was the woman who walked away and never looked back. I didn't go back for closure. I went back to prove I didn't need it. And in the end, I wasn't the one left behind. I was the one who chose a different path and never looked back. If this story reminded you of a time you had to walk away to find your peace, share it in the comments. And if you're still writing your own next chapter, know this sometimes. The life you deserve begins the moment you stop asking for permission to exist.